As a GP with almost 30 years of experience of seeing all kinds of patients, old and young, big and small, with big and small issues, my focus is mainly around wellness and preventative medicine. That is really keeping my patients and my community well and healthy, and then preventing chronic and infectious illnesses. And this is really why the issue of vaccinations is so close to my heart. And this is why vaccinations are a critical component of keeping patients and preventing them from getting ill. As we say, prevention is better than cure. And one of the conditions where preventative medicine is vital, very, very important, is meningitis. Meningitis, an inflammatory condition that involves the membranes or the meninges that cover the brain and going down the spinal cord. We know that it can be caused by bacteria, by viruses, fungi, and even parasites. Meningococcal meningitis is a severe infection and occurs when meningococcal bacteria invade the blood or even the cerebrospinal fluid, which originates through the throat or the nose. And this can be a major cause of mortality in South Africa. This type of meningitis develops rapidly and requires urgent medical attention. The problem is, even with the best access and the quickest access to the best medical care, 50% of these cases are fatal. And of those 50% who survive, most can have lifelong complications and disabilities such as loss of a limb or limbs, deafness, central nervous system problems such as seizures and epilepsy, or even permanent brain damage. Meningococcal disease is endemic to South Africa and it occurs all year round, but especially with the peak, somewhere from June going down to October. It can affect anyone of any age, but mainly affects babies, preschool children, and of course young people. The annual incidence, and these are new infections of bacterial meningitis in the South African population, is still fairly low, about 4 per 100,000 population. But this goes much higher in those babies under 1 year. It can rise up to between 40 per 100,000 population. Things that would put people at risk of getting bacterial meningitis would include things like malnutrition, overcrowding in households, persons living with HIV infection, people who are not immunized, and those who are exposed to high levels of indoor air pollution. And when we come to symptoms of meningitis, it can be quite classic, things like a stiff neck, and these have to occur together: stiff neck, high fever, severe headache, and vomiting. And going with that, you can have some sensitivity to light and an element of confusion in fewer cases. However, the symptoms in infants can be harder to detect. They can have a temperature, high temperature, but cold in the extremities, a high-pitched moaning sound, sometimes blank staring. They may even be inactive, drowsy, without an appetite. And sometimes that can confuse one with many other illnesses. But the late symptom of septicemia is a very, very characteristic, what we call a purpuric rash, spots that occur on the body. When you see that in a baby, that is a medical emergency. And there are not many babies who can actually survive that sort of bacterial meningitis. The good news is that meningitis is potentially preventable thanks to the development of vaccines that are now accessible and that have been produced in South Africa in recent years. Unfortunately, our progress in this vaccine uptake still lags substantially behind those of the other vaccine-preventable diseases. And so we need to put more focus in making sure that our population groups have access to this vaccine, which can protect against meningococcal meningitis. And so having said all this, it's essential for us to emphasize that kids from the age of 9 months through to 2 years who are most at risk of this meningococcal meningitis require a 2-dose vaccine at least 12 weeks apart. And doing this dose, it confers maximal immunity, maximal protection against meningitis, and thus it's vital that we make sure that the second dose is not neglected or forgotten. And I think if we carry this out and we are careful in terms of looking after our population, we can reduce the incidence of a serious and severe illness like meningococcal meningitis.